hates us. The very thing in us that God finds so beautiful, he finds repugnant. And our enemy, he's got three weapons, right? He's got sin, suffering, and death. We should be afraid of only one of those, sin. But we're really afraid of the other two. Right? That's the danger. Suffering, Jesus entered it and conquered it. We can have victory in suffering. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Death, Jesus conquered death. And he conquered sin. But sin's the thing we should be most afraid of, but we're least afraid of it. We'd probably rather sin than suffering. And that's a sign of how broken we are. We want to make no provision for our flesh. We want to understand that every sin, no matter how little, it damages us. And God doesn't want us damaged. He wants us healed. He wants us free. What we want to make sure we do, a great way to fight patterns of sin in our life, is to be about others. And I had this crazy moment that happened actually not last year on St. Patrick's Day. I went home and we watched The Quiet Man. Who knows that movie? John Wayne. Is that not a great movie? I love that. If you're not, The Quiet Man, really? It's actually required in the catechism, so you should see it. We're watching this movie, and I'm sitting there, and I'm remembering how our faith teaches us that you should never watch a movie like that without popcorn. And I want to be obedient, you know. So I'm sitting there, and I'm really comfortable, and I want popcorn, and I decide the smart thing to do is toss out some hints. Because there's 9 people in the room. Somebody will catch the hint and go make popcorn. Yeah? That's called a sin alert, right? It hit me like a brick when I was sitting there saying, now, you know, I'm planning how to do this. And that's when I thought, nope, I got up and made everyone popcorn. Right? Make no provision for that. Make no provision for just even those little things. No way. I want to be served? Fine. Then I'm going to serve. I want love and acceptance from others? Well, then I'm going to show love and acceptance to others. I want peace in my life? Then I'm going to offer peace to other people. One of the best ways we can combat patterns of sin in our life is by simply stepping out of our need and entering into other people's lives. It's a really strong medicine for the sin. And it just takes that little step, and it becomes addictive to live for others. It truly does. My favorite of the principles comes from Pope John Paul II. Okay? And it's this line. Act like you wish you felt. Okay? Act like you wish you felt. This is a quote from one of his books. Pope John Paul II. The key to holiness does not lie first and foremost in identifying and overcoming sin, but in disciplining and educating our emotions. We can sum this up with the phrase, I will act like I wish I felt. My best example of that comes from another dad line. Dad doesn't say much, but when he does, it's worth $1 million, right? My sister Kelly, I was probably 8, she was 10, and she was going to make her first dinner for all of us. We all had to take a turn. So I sat at Dad's right, and it wasn't because of the honor or anything. I needed to be in swinging distance, right? But to this day, there's arguments about what she made. But it came to the table. She put it down, everybody gets a scoop, we say our prayers, and then I shovel, right? I go right after it, because there's a lot of boys in my family, and I could lose fingers if I go slow. The first bite, you ever like do the 9-volt battery on your tongue thing? You ever do that? Multiply it times 1,000,000, and you have a small sense of what happened in here when that went in. And I thought it would be appropriate to share my observation. I started to lift up my head, with tears, and my dad is taking another scoop, and with teeth gritted, he literally says this, quote, "You eat it and you smile, boy." And in there quick, didn't notice. But what a great line, right? My sister poured all her little heart and soul into that. It was her best effort that day, and oh my gosh, it was proof of original sin. We can become so obsessed with our own comfort that we forget there's a real value in acting like we wish we felt. Too often, we interpret our irritation as a sign that something's wrong, and we leave us out of that something. Yeah? You have a Big B's coffee near you, and that's my idea of heaven. When I lived in East Lansing, I literally got to the point where I walked in the door, "Hey, Father," they had it ready. Right? 3 shots of espresso and a cup of coffee. It's what the Lord intended. They don't have one anywhere near my assignment now, and I pine for it. Well, I was on my way to a meeting, and I saw a sign for Big B Coffee, and yes! And I'm a little psychotic about being on time, so I knew I had to hurry. And I get in line, it's not too bad. There's only 2 people in front of me. One of them's a mom with a little squeaker. And this kid was shockingly cute, right? And the whole staff behind the counter just started talking to him. And it was really cute, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's great, come on, you know. But no, they're just on this kid, and I'm waiting. And now it's getting to the point where I gotta go. And I haven't got my coffee, right? And I felt this irritation. I'm like, yeah, you know, he's really cute. My coffee, you know, this is what I'm thinking. And of course I'm smiling. I have my collar on, I had to, you know. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, truly like a bolt of lightning, that's what I heard in my heart. I felt like the Lord said to me, just because you're irritated doesn't mean they're wrong, right? How cool is it that 4 or 5 college kids decided to take care of this little guy in front of them, right? They made him some kind of sugary delight and gave it to him. I was mad because it was delaying me. I was irritated, and my first assumption was there's something wrong with this situation. And there was. It was me. It was me. And this acting like we wish we felt, it can deliver us from that. I felt irritation. I acted happy. And yeah, he's so cute, coffee. You know, I didn't get my coffee, but I got something obviously so much more important. And I've noticed more and more, I've been slowly able to plug this into my life. I'm in situations where I'm irritated, and immediately I assume something's wrong with the situation, and I can't believe how many times it's like, oh, I know what's wrong with the situation. If we act like we wish we felt, we can be delivered from that. We really can. Walking into a situation and giving everyone our emotion might not help them so much. And our best moments tend to be the ones where we act like we wish we felt. When I was at Lansing Catholic, I was there 10 years, and we won a total of 28 football games in that 10 years. I died a little every time, right? Well, there was one game I was on the sideline, and we were playing Lumen Christi, and they were beating us 9,000 to nothing, right? I mean, it was horrible, and it's freezing rain. And I'm standing there, and I'm cold to my bones. And the boys, it's 2 minutes left, and there's always that kid on the sideline, "We can do this!" I'm like, no, you really can't. You know? And I wanted to go home, but I thought, I can't leave them, you know? And so I'm standing there, and all of a sudden, this one young man, Mark, he's standing right on my shoulder, and he's kind of leaning on me. And I look at him, and he's smiling. And I'm like, we're down 9,000 to nothing, you know. And I said, what? And he went, like this. And I look at the stand. Nobody's there. Right? Every mom and dad and brother and sister were like, yeah, all right. You know, boom. And this is exactly what he said. I'll never forget it. He said, you really love us. And I thought, I do. While I was standing there with dreams of hot chocolate and a warm fire in my head, what kept me there was love, acting like I wish I felt. And at the game when it was over, the coach for the other team talked to me about it later. He said, I couldn't figure it out. The game was over. We got crushed. And all these boys picked me up. Right? They were just so fired up. They were like, you stayed. And I'm like, yeah, I did. Never occurred to me to do anything else. Act like we wish we felt. Can't tell you how many times walking the halls I'd hear a student saying to another student, sometimes respectfully, careful, Mr. So-and-so, he's in a bad mood. Careful, Mrs. So-and-so, she's in a bad mood today. And I made this promise that I just wasn't going to do that to them. Because people do it to me and I don't like it. Do you? When somebody's feeling snarly and nasty and they dump it on you, it's not a great thing. So we got to learn to act like we wish we felt. Walking into a room, saying, not getting right away in touch with how I feel, but instead saying, how do I wish I felt? Act that, and it'll bring healing. And people have asked me before about this. They're like, well, what about authenticity? Shouldn't I be authentic? And I was like, no. Authentically, we're so broken that doesn't go so well. I need discipline to be who God calls me to be. If I am who I call me to be, that's a low standard. It's like when someone says to me, oh, Father, I'm a good guy, I've never killed anyone. I'm like, that's your standard? Really? That's it? There's my goal. I want to get to 85 and not have killed anyone. I've never hit anyone for saying that. Thank you. I love that. We got to have a ridiculous standard that doesn't involve, be authentically you, personality-wise, absolutely. But that doesn't mean inflicting our emotional state on everyone we meet. Some people need to see what it's like to live as people who trust in God's goodness. Whatever my irritation, whatever my pain, God will get me through. And I'll live out of that instead of whatever emotion I feel in any given moment. I gotta go quick. Figuring out what to skip. How about this one? When I'm angry, it's usually because I have expectations that weren't met. Okay? Plug this in. It'll actually scare you how often that's accurate. When we find ourselves angry at a situation or a person, it's usually because we have expectations and they weren't met. And that alone will help us figure out what's just anger, anger that is just, and what's anger that is not just. Right? People will say, Father, I'm sorry, I got angry. Well, sometimes we're supposed to. Jesus got angry. How do we know when anger is justified or not? Well, your expectation, was it just? Was it a fair expectation? And was it spoken if it needed to be? Some obviously we shouldn't have to speak. I had a horrible day at MSU, a day where I buried a kid who died of cancer, 18, and it was just, I was so sad. He was such a good kid, and it was a terrible tragedy. And on my way to the church for Mass, we had another call, and it was dreadful, and finally I get to Mass, and I'm a little wound, right? And a woman came up to me with this look, and she started telling me, Father, there's a flyer on that bulletin board. That's for Lent. And Lent was over 2 weeks ago. What is going on at this parish? Right? I blew up. Right? I blew up. I started this whole thing. I started with, listen. And that's never a good word to start with, right? Because usually it means you're not listening, right? And I'm about 45 seconds into a really solid rant when it hit me, and she's right, And what was my expectation? That she would somehow know everything that happened to me that day. That she would somehow have knowledge of this. She had no clue. And most days when she'd come out and point something like that, she did it a lot, I usually said thank you. Because I'm not a detail guy. I miss details. I like it when detail people help me, right? Father, the flyer for Jubilee Year, that was 14 years ago. Might want to take that down, My anger was not justified because it was based on an idea that she somehow knew what was going on in my life. I asked her forgiveness because I was wrong. I've gotten angry, and I was right sometimes. I couldn't think of any. It's pretty sad. When we get angry, it's really good to ask the Lord to help us pause and say, is this a just expectation? Is this a spoken expectation, if it needed to be? It'll help. You'd be amazed at how quick the anger can dissipate when we realize it's all based on an expectation that's completely unfair and that we wouldn't want anybody to put on us. The last principle I'd love for us to look at is, I call it stay close to mama. Okay? Stay close to mama. When I was in seminary, it was the first time I was introduced to the phrase, Holy Mother Church. Okay? Love the Blessed Mother, right? I love Mary. She's awesome. I had never heard the church called Holy Mother Church. And I read a few books that they gave us, because I had to, about the church as our mother. And ever since then, I've had that in my head. Stay close to mama. The church is a gift that God gave us, the bride of Christ. And there's so much wisdom and beauty offered there. And when we reduce the church in our lives to saying, well, here's this list of rules, and I don't like that one, or here's this list of rules, and I'm going to hold to them and earn my salvation, then we're in trouble. But what we want to recognize is we've been given a gift in this faith, that as the body of Christ, we are not without a head, and that the church has wisdom for us that can guide our steps, each movement along this life. I often will have people tell me about why they struggle with the church, and it's because of her imperfections. Right? And I always tell them, well, that works for me, because I'm imperfect. If it was a perfect church, you and I got to leave it. We're a mess. We're a church that is broken, and a church that is still loved and used by God. And it becomes a source of hope for you and me, because, gosh, we're broken, and we're still loved and used by God. And if the church was perfect in all that she did, we'd have to leave. There's hope for us because there's hope from the church and in the church. My grandma died at 96 years old. And it was an amazing thing for me. I went over there the last 4 years of her life, and I made tape after tape, just asking her things and recording her answers. And in that process, I still play those. I still have them on my iPod, and I listen to her because she learned so much in her life. She made terrible mistakes. She told me about them. She told me how she got over them. She did incredibly beautiful and heroic and brave things, and she told me about those. And that's you and me, right? All of us. And the church is a reflection of that in each of us. We have to show mercy in the way that mercy has been shown to us, and we have to show humility in following God's lead. This is the gift He gave us, and it's a remarkable gift. I ask God each day to change and guide my heart so that I'm closer to Him and not so obsessed with what I hope is true, and instead going with what God has said is true. It's a powerful thing for us to do. It challenges us and can bend us and bring us closer to the kingdom of heaven. I'll invite each of us to recognize that in our lives are a ton of rules at work. And a lot of those are beautiful rules that make us the holy men and women God calls us to be. Figure out the principles you operate out of and offer them to the Lord. The ones I give you tonight are stay close to mama, or when I'm angry, it's usually because I had an expectation that didn't get met. Act like you wish you felt. If you feed the dog, it stays on the porch. You can't control your environment. And remember, don't exercise too much control. And remember who you are. Right? Do that. And all of these things that you fret about, you'll become the answer to in Jesus' name. Quite literally. That all the things we fear about the future of our society, well, what if we here made these commitment to holiness? A radical commitment to be saints. That would transform everything. Look at 11 disciples, absolutely on fire for Jesus. They started off in a country that's so small you could fit it in Lake Michigan. And they went from there and gave us this. 2,000 years later, we're still standing, and not many other things are from that time. That's 11 men sold out to Jesus. What if we all did? It would be the answer to all the things we're afraid of, all the things that we worry about. We do this by exercising control over the one thing in our lives God said control, and that's in here. It's ourselves. We could do it because God's power is in us. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead lives and breathes in you and in me. Not a cheap knockoff of it, but the real thing. God breath in your lungs. God's blood in your veins. God's strength in your body. All of it's there. We pray to love Jesus and to follow him unreservedly. What we'll do tomorrow is look at the different ways that we suffer or experience pain in our life, and how and why the Lord can and will heal us, how we can respond to that. I hope you're able to come. I thank you so much for coming tonight. It's a real blessing for me to be here. I've really enjoyed getting to know Father Mark. A very gracious welcome from the staff. Staff and a priest like that are a result of a wonderful group